Hi class, we're going to start again on working on the lighthouse drawing. Took a little break from it, but this time I'm going to work on the sky, and you can see how I kind of develop that. There'll be a series of short clips where I color and I talk about what I'm doing. So let's dive back into it. Okay guys, I have sketched out loosely some clouds. I'm keeping them kind of fluffy, and I'm trying to be careful not to make puffy clouds that go all the way across in a pattern. So I don't know how well you can see it, but it's done very lightly in blue. I just used a chalk pastel pencil. That way I could rub out and it wouldn't interfere if I wanted to. So I'm going to start out with, I want to make this sky look a little bit stormy. So I'm going to start out with my gray, and I'm going to work on the bottom of my clouds here. I'm keeping my touch very, very light, lots of control. If we think of clouds like we think of land, it makes it a little bit easier. Now, the problem is, clouds are structures, and they do have like a bottom and a top and a middle, but they don't appear to be like structures sometimes because they are made out of water vapor. So they're kind of tricky. You have to think of this part right here as, yes, it has a bottom, and yes, it can be very flat, but then everything kind of builds and stacks up. So it's kind of a different way of thinking. And it just takes a lot of experimentation. And honestly, whenever I decided to do a series of landscape paintings that involved a lot of clouds, which you can see on my website, lorificus.com, I actually did some research, on clouds and how they formed and how they behaved. I watched lots of videos, time-lapse videos of storms and how the clouds formed and things like that. And for me, it really, really helped. I'm one of those people that likes to get in there and find out how things work before I start drawing it. That's especially essential whenever you're talking about anatomy. That's a big deal for anatomy, is to learn about how the body behaves and moves. So now I'm just adding a little bit of blue to my gray because there is water underneath my clouds, and clouds are made out of water droplets, so they do kind of reflect back a little bit. If you're ever painting clouds, clouds are not just white most of the time. They have a little bit of other colors associated with them. So you want to include those in the drawing that you do. Looking for my blending stump. Can't seem to find it. Hang on a minute. Gonna get my blending stump. Okay, I'm back. Went and got my blending stumps. These are paper stumps. You can buy them even at Walmart, and you can use them to blend your colored pencil or your crayon with. If you need to clean off the stump, then you just lay it down. You take a X-Acto knife and you shave it very, very lightly and shave off anything that's dirty. I'm going to go ahead and use this since it has some bluish gray with it. And since I'm working with clouds, I'm going to kind of keep with the whole circular motion thing. Whenever you're coloring anything, if you're coloring or shading and you're working with clouds or bricks or a building or waves or grass, think about the direction that everything folds or grows or turns in your shading and your coloring. So that way your contour lines as you shade will help you create the feeling of 3D or volume or form with your object. Like whenever I shaded this, I didn't go side to side. I curved my coloring so that as my coloring was applied, any texture I created inadvertently would work with me, not against me. So whenever I'm coloring these clouds, I'm coloring kind of curves and swirls so that that will work with me, any streaks that I have, not work against me. If I was just to color side to side or just up and down, it would create kind of a weird flattening effect. So I want to avoid that whenever I'm coloring or rendering or shading, whatever, even if I'm painting and creating strokes. So I'm going to develop this a little bit more and we'll be back in a minute. Okay, here I have developed my clouds just a little bit more. I've added some different colors at the bottom, and my areas of white are mostly just the paper that I put a little bit of white on. Whenever you're doing clouds and things like that, you can actually use the edge of the sky to define the edge of your clouds. And so you can go in with your blue and kind of pick at the edge of the shapes of the clouds and define those just a little bit more. And you don't need to worry about filling in all that white until you go in and you start to blend a little bit in those white areas. So then whenever you're done, you have something that looks much more natural. Then you can also blend, just be careful that when you're blending that you're not getting your yellow or other colors mixed up with your blues, because you'll end up with grays or other things that you don't intend. And so over here on this other side, I've developed the left-hand side. I've decided to make, since I've got clouds over here on this side, I'm going to make this side a little bit brighter. I've added some more blending with my stump, smoothing my edges to make these clouds softer and a little bit more fluffy than the clouds on the other side. I'm still going to be careful about that yellow mixing in with the blue so I don't get greens. And now I'm going to take my white, and I'm going to use my white on the edge of the clouds to make them softer and make them a vanishing edge rather than a hard edge. We want a soft edge there. Clouds are combinations of hard and soft edges. So I'm adding this white to kind of soften these areas and mix my yellow a little bit more to reduce its brightness and intensity. And I'm making sure that I'm kind of laying my crayon on its side so that as I work with it, I can slightly turn it so the tip doesn't get too terribly blunted, so I don't have to try and sharpen it. That might not turn out very good, and I'll end up clogging up my sharpener if I'm not careful. Okay, here I'm just going to continue working in on these clouds, trying to get my sky nice and smooth and blended. I'm using my stump going multiple directions so that I try and get rid of as many of the drag marks as I can. I'm blending my edges to create that soft lost edge that we talked about. Next, I'm going to be starting on my water and finishing up any finishing touches in the sky that I happen to notice as I work on my water's edge. So I'm going to work on both sides here of the water, and we'll be back in a minute with how that turns out. I'm using my fancy crayons, so they're going to be a little bit more blendable than what you guys are using. I'm just using regular copy paper, so the better paper you use, the better your results, but we're just trying to use whatever we have on hand, and that's what we're going to use. And it would make the blending a little bit easier. The burnishing is pretty hard on your hands and it wears your hands out, but it's worth it in the end. Burnishing is what it is called whenever you use a blending tool to blend different areas. I'm going to work on the cupola and make sure that the sky can be seen through the railing. Hi class, it took me a long time to finish this, but I finally got it done. It's kind of student grade quality, but it still turned out pretty decent. And if you have any questions, email me through your school email. I can look over your work and give you some advice if you need. Let's take a look and see how it turned out. Okay, let's take a look at how things turned out. I got my water done. I left most of this white so that the white would be a little bit brighter. I wish I'd done more of that here because the white didn't turn out as bright as I'd like, but I could always go through with another material, like a little bit of a white paint to kind of touch that up if I was really that concerned about it. My lighthouse is still pretty basic. I'm very pleased with how my sky turned out. So let me know how yours turns out, and can't wait to see them.